we got a super high-tech studio here at Troy Studios. It's really top-notch. Also, if these lights could just not be broken. Oh, damn it. All right, fine. We'll deal with the broken lights. We'll deal with it all. It's poetry time, baby. Yay! Get it. Yo, what's up, guys? I'm back with another poetry video essay, and I am so psyched about this one because it's one of my favorite poets ever, Sylvia Plath. I love Sylvia Plath. She's a literal genius, and not even in a oh, her work is so good, which it is, type of way of genius. She's a genius in she has an 160 IQ and only 1 in every 30,000 plus people are that smart type way of being a genius. So her work is fantastic. Her life is tragic. I mean, sensing some similarities here. But we're gonna just jump right into the video to avoid another 17-minute Elizabeth Bishop video essay disaster in which the file sizes were too long and it almost corrupted, and deal with all that headache, not trying to deal with all that headache, trying to move past the stress and just tell you guys all about Sylvia Plath. So it's time to get right into it. To jump into it, she was born to Aurelia and Daddy Plath in Boston, Massachusetts in 1932. Hold on a second. How come all the poets I'm covering are from Massachusetts? Definitely has to be a coincidence, and definitely not trying to subtly imply that all the best poets were born in Massachusetts. Anyway, so yeah, just because of the whole genius thing, she published a poem at age 8. I mean, it was in the Boston Herald's children's section, but I can't think of many people who've been publishing poems since they were 8 years old. I should probably also stop comparing myself to Sylvia Plath, which I'm going to start implementing into this video right now. She also won an award for a painting she did from the Scholastic Art and Writing Awards in 1947. She got a scholarship to Smith College. Big shout out to Smith College, hey! Where she edited the college literary magazine and was a first group scholar each semester. I don't know what that means, but sounds good. She was also on the editorial board of the Campus Cat, a humor magazine, secretary of the humor board, so she clearly had a good sense of humor. If this is a Tinder profile, swiping right all the way. She taught art in Northampton, had several poems published by Harper's magazine in her sophomore year. Then she won a fiction contest for Mademoiselle magazine and got to be a guest editor for it for the next summer. Unfortunately, this is when Plath's depression began clearly manifesting itself into desperate actions to end her own life. Her first suicide attempt happened on August 24th, 1953. At first, she was a missing person because no one could figure out where she was. It became somewhat of a local news story that this gifted and talented young girl had gone missing. Her mother was interviewed for the news, and she said that Sylvia had set standards for herself that are almost unattainable, and that for some time she had been unable to write. And instead of just regarding this as an arid period that every writer faces at times, she believed that something had happened to her mind, and that it was unable to produce creatively anymore. Sylvia took a bottle of sleeping pills along with a glass of water and a blanket down into the Plath's basement, crawled into a dirty 20 by 10 foot crawl space with cement floor and dirt walls, and took the pills. She was found 3 days later, hiding from her parents expertly by moving the firewood that was blocking the crawl space and then moving it back into the exact same space once she had crawled in. When found, she described the experience, saying she believed she blissfully succumbed to the whirling blackness that she honestly believed was eternal oblivion. I'm so grateful for my own selfish reasons that she survived to produce the rest of the work that defined her career and made her a great poetry legend that I have had the pleasure of reading. I'm glad for her personally that she was able to write long enough to make a long-lasting impact on the world and build a tremendous legacy for herself as author of some of the most impactful poems ever. It's really an eye-opener to me and all other aspiring writers out there, because it shows that writer's block happens to literally everyone, even one of the greatest of all time, and that it's okay to have writer's block and that you can just keep trying to work and get past it. Anyway, after a 6-month hospital stay, she returned to Smith and graduated summa cum laude. Like I said, this girl was smart. She then received a Fulbright to study in Cambridge, where she met another poet named Ted Hughes, whom she married shortly after. She then moved back to America, where she met Robert Lowell and Anne Sexton, two other prominent poets of the time. Lowell and Sexton urged her to write more from her various extremely interesting life experiences, with Sexton specifically telling her not to be afraid to inject more feminine personality into her writing. This was really what birthed the confessional style that Sylvia is known best for today. Plath tried to take this advice to heart, but it was extremely difficult for her at first. She decided to stay at an artist colony in Saratoga Springs, where she would learn to be true to her own weirdness, although some anxieties about her confessional writing still remained. The poems that Plath is best known for, like Daddy, Tulips, and Mirror, are all incredibly confessional and were written towards the end of her life, so it's safe to say that she eventually came into her own in this regard. For some examples of this, we can turn to Pamela Amis's fantastic book, A Disturbance in Mirrors, The Poetry of Sylvia Plath, for some further analysis. Amas points out that the mirror is a recurrent and central motif for Plath, and that it's able to encompass many of the essential themes of her poetry. Some of these themes include the exploration of boundary between self and world, the struggle for rebirth in a transformed world, the difference between what's true and what's false, or what's real and unreal, the process of perception, self-consciousness, and ambivalence. In Through the Looking Glass, the sequel to Carroll's Alice in Wonderland, Alice climbs through a mirror into another world, and Plath refers to her as her muse Alice. Additionally, in her honors senior thesis at Smith, that was about mirrors as well. It was called The Magic Mirror, a study of the double in two of Dostoevsky's novels, which sounds a lot better than whatever the hell I'm doing. And also, yes, I did have to look up how to say Dostoevsky, but I am saying it right, aren't I? Dostoevsky, Dostoevsky, Dostoevsky. If I'm saying it wrong, that's going to be a really embarrassing part. Anyway, Plath's poems deal with the relationship of a divided and alienated self navigating a contradictory and alienating world. The collective persona of these poems is a speaker trapped between dual mirrors of the world and her own mind. Her poem, The Other, finds the speaker talking directly to the mirror. Cold Glass, how you insert yourself between myself and myself. Another poem, titled Mirror, like I'm saying, Plath really liked writing about mirrors, was written right after her first child was born, and deals with her grappling with old age. The poem, written in the perspective of the mirror, has lines like, "Whatever I see, I swallow immediately," and "In me, she has drowned a young girl, and in me, an old woman rises toward her, day after day, like a terrible fish." It's funny though, because when I shave my beard, my mirror just asks me, who's this 12-year-old boy and where did Troy go? The context for Plath's poetry is that she wrote in the post-World War II society. But instead of being overtly political, she used the brutality of war and alienation, of bureaucracy, as metaphors for the relationship between self and world. A prime example of this is the Nazi imagery employed throughout maybe her most famous poem, Daddy, where she speaks of the object of the poem, most likely her father, as a man in black with a Mein Kampf look, as well as an engine shuffling her off like a Jew to Dachau, Auschwitz, Belsen. These hyperbolic metaphors have a great deal of emotional intensity to them, and they point to the great tension which Plath felt between herself and the world, which makes a lot of sense, especially given the greater context of her life. She also takes notice of other negative aspects of society, such as dehumanization and gender roles, in her poem, The Applicant. Throughout the poem, she is talking about fake aspects of humans that most of us take for granted these days, like glass eyes, false teeth, crutches, and rubber breasts. Plath seems to be implying that our culture has become so sterile and machine-dominated that some of us have already become part artifact ourselves. The man in the poem is described only by his black suit, which is meant to symbolize work, the role that affects so much of how he is viewed within society and culture. Classic capitalism. However, the woman is even further degraded, described only as it, and only being given form at all by the institution of marriage. Plath is making a strong point about boundaries between self and world here, especially from a female perspective. The poem's man is also very alienated and has very few options. His relative freedom in the poem, however, can be seen as such when compared to the extremely limited options of the woman. The woman makes contact with the world only through the medium of the man, who himself is already twice removed from it. I can feel a bit of resentment dripping off this poem, and this resentment, which is perfectly understandable from any woman writer, especially of this era, had an even greater and much sadder layer of context added atop of it when recently published letters from Sylvia to her therapist reveal that Ted Hughes beat her 2 days before she miscarried their second child. What the actual Ted? 2 years later, separated from Ted, with her children sleeping in the other room, Plath ended her own life. Throughout her troubled life, whether it was her own sometimes unrealistic expectations of herself, distorted images, the mirror through which she viewed herself and the world, sometimes spat back at her, an unjust and dehumanizing society, or her own spouse's abuse, life was not always fair to Sylvia. However, despite all of this, Plath's impact and legacy as one of the most famous and impactful poets in the American 20th century remains unquestioned, and I think that this is something that she would take great comfort in. Although the mirrors of earth were unkind to her, the mirrors of history paint a picture of one of the brightest, most persevering, and strongest women this country has ever known. So rest in peace to Sylvia. Jeff.
What?
I'm
Hey.
Hi, I'm making a video. Do you know how to pronounce that one concentration camp that's spelled
Auschwitz.
D-A-C-H-A-U?
Dachau, I went there.
Dachau, thank you.
Dachau.
Thanks, guys. Wait, I forgot how to say it. I don't speak this language.
Dachau.
Dachau.